host, Kevin Berrier, and welcome to 5 Dubs Marketing Pros, where we highlight awesome brands and the stories behind them, and maybe just maybe geek out on all things marketing. All right, let's dive in. So today we're exploring a fascinating concept in marketing that challenges the traditional boundaries of what we consumers perceive as a brand. It's not always about clever names or flashy images. Sometimes the most compelling brand is the person themselves. Today, we have the spotlight shining on a figure whose personal journey and professional endeavors embody the essence of personal branding. Her story is not just about building a brand, it's about living it and breathing it and being a true representation of one's values and passions in every action taken, including her amazing talents as a world class musician and creative. Today's guest is an example of the power of personal connection, authenticity, and the profound impact one individual can have when their life's work is in perfect harmony with who they are. Today, we'll chat with Nicole Brancato as we explore the depth behind the person, the passion that drives her, and how she's redefining the very concept of branding within her work by simply just being her authentic self. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Kevin, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to chat with me. I'm excited. So, quick fun fact. We love to keep our network very intertwined, and I spoke to some colleagues of your husband back a little bit back, and I've been able to learn a lot about who you are and what you do, and I started realizing that um, the way that you've approached, and whether it's intentional or it's just kind of organic and kind of happened the way it chose to happen, like your brand is incredible. Just, I mean, going to your website, seeing all of the awesome things that you're doing, really inspired me to really want to learn more about you and kind of dive deeper into the rabbit hole of all of the awesome videos and works that you're doing, projects that you're doing. But for those that don't know about Nicole Brancato, tell them a little bit about who you are and how you came to be. What's your story?
Well, first off, thank you for saying all of that. All of those public facing materials, a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears goes into everything, really. So I'm so happy to hear about the impact that they have. I am a pianist, composer, and curator. And so, really, I'm a creative person who works primarily in the medium of sound, let's say. And I've ended up wearing a lot of hats. My work will really range from, let's say, a more traditional concert format where you see a piano and you're hearing piano music, to multimedia installations that bridge across different art forms. Like they have visual art and performance art and music and, like projection, and they have maybe some sort of like social justice theme or some sort of environmental theme, and then, film scoring and really everything in between. And it has been really a journey of self discovery and listening to my own inner creative voice. And I realized at some point along the way that I was really someone that um, loves collaborating with people. And in particular, people who come from different forms of expression, because you really learn something intimately from other people in that way, and learn more about the world and their perspectives. But I am a big believer that the things that we create collaboratively together is kind of more than the sum of its parts. I'm a big believer in that. And these ideas have really driven me in my work.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, you've caught the attention of many people. I mean, critics have said that you've the way you play will stay with them forever. You're a pianist like no other. You've reimagined the role of a concert pianist. I mean, and it seems as I'm watching your videos, it seems so organic. Like the it almost feels like the brand within that project has created itself just by you collaborating with others, or just by kind of feeling the work that you do, and it almost, like, I feel like it manifests so organically. Is that, am I reading that right? Or I know there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into all types of branding, but yours just feels so organic. Like, what's the, How does that work? Because it's so unique.
I think no matter what you do in life, when you are steering your own ship as like an entrepreneur or a creative or any combination in between, um, you have to have a mission, and it has to be guided by your own inner voice, like that gut feeling, that intentionality from within. And over time, I got better and better at listening to that inner voice. And it's a kind of amazing thing because, of course, what I do, a lot of my work is outside of traditional bounds. And I'm always looking for ways of pushing the envelope in my loving way, or finding things that aren't the norm, and uplifting people just in general in the arts. And in that way, even though it was something outside of the traditional boundaries, let's say, because it came from my heart, I know it sounds cheesy, but because it came from like my own intention, my own inner voice, people recognize that authenticity. And especially in the arts, but I think in our lives in general, that's what people are really after. They want something genuine, they want something real, they want something authentic. In the music business, if you're going out to a show or event or something, you're not going out to see someone being fake, right? Like you don't want you're spending money on a concert ticket or event ticket, or you have some sort of cover or whatever. Like you are going to have a real, genuine experience. And that has to start from the artist's side. That has to start from within and the work that you make and what you're bringing to the world. Um, and honestly, it's a thing that's easier said than done. But I had this experience actually during the pandemic. I think the pandemic was a um, coming to terms moment with so many people in so many ways. And before the pandemic, I still did a lot of modern, contemporary kind of work, but I also did more traditional work, more traditional kind of music and concerts and things like that. And I was kind of splitting my time 50-50 with what I thought was like the career that was expected for a musician versus what I really was after. And the pandemic happened, and I just had this light bulb moment of that that part, the part that I thought was expected, and that you know that is like the traditional concert pianist role, things like that, is really not me. And I just like finally made the decision of like setting that stuff aside. Like I love Bach and Beethoven and Brahms, but like lots of people play that. Let's like let you rest for a little while and let me pursue this thing that's like on the inside that has been nagging at my brain for years and years and years. And once I really committed to it 100%, things really changed for me.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's so interesting to hear that story because I feel like as a viewer or as your audience, as I'm watching your body of work, you mentioned like it starts with the artist side, and the goal is for the audience to have an experience, and it feels like with your work, it's almost like your goal is to give that audience an emotion, like things right from like, so for example, Harmony of the Spheres, which I've really, really enjoyed it. It's solo recital from Earth to the Ethereal. It everything about just that one project out of so many projects that you do. And we're going to talk about a very interesting one here in a little bit. But Harmony of the Spheres, like it was just so like, I I still can't find the words of just like, because I don't like, I absolutely loved it. It created this like such unique emotion of just like this wowism. And that's just from the performance itself. But then when you look at, some of the promotional side of it, it's, this amazing picture of you with like an interstellar dress and like everything that you created to complement such an amazing performance was just like so high and tight, really. How, when you're coming up with these just so these unique projects, like what's the process behind that? I'm dying to know.
Thank you so much. Gosh, I'm speechless. I'm so happy
Oh,
that it
awesome.
it had that impact on you. That's the goal. So when I hear that, I go like, oh yes, like
It's amazing.
people were
Everything you
impacted.
do. Yeah. And
Thank
I
you.
mean, I feel like any musician I'm in awe of. I don't have a musical gene in my body. I've tried. I played the trumpet in high
I bet
school.
it's in there.
I was pretty good. I was the second seat for jazz band in middle school, and then it kind of died off by high school. But I had like my little like 10 minutes of fame in middle school. But I'm so in awe of just the level in which you perform. It's like it's you can tell that you are like it's almost like you've transcended um into like a different plane as you play. Like I would almost wonder if someone came up to you and tapped you on the shoulder if you know, because like it seems like you're so into your work, mind, body, and soul.
you
I
know,
think that's the emotion that really like that's what gives me this emotion of like, wow, this is beyond just a typical performance that I don't want to downplay. Like the musician, all musicians are very talented, but you're just like you're so like I can tell you're feeling it, and I think
oh,
that
absolutely.
resonates. Yeah.
And I want to circle back around to your question, your previous question, excuse me, in a moment. But first, I want to address what you just said because that is like the pinnacle of what you want to achieve when you work in a creative field. And in particular, in music, there is this magical thing that happens when you're putting the entirety of yourself into a project, and let's say it comes to a performance, and you're you're operating at that space of non-judgment, like, oh, is this like cool or not cool or whatever, do people like it or not like it, whatever, like all of those like judgment things aside, but you're operating at a place of like, I'm like giving this my all, and I'm like giving it out into the world. And there's this really amazing thing that happens where the audience feels that, and they just, you feel the energy in the room where like everyone's connecting, and you just feel this like circular energy exchange between like the
Yes.
audience is all feeling it with each other, and as a performer you feel it, and you're just like giving, and it's just going back and forth, and it is an amazing feeling. And that's when you finish a performance and everyone is just glowing, and they come to you and they have so many questions, and they just start talking to each other, and I think to myself like, this is like, this is at least a small way that I can make a difference in the world, like just making everyone like positive and connected. And I don't know, if we were all feeling like that all the time, like what a world it would be
Oh,
you know
100%. I mean, it's the world's a very polarizing world right now, and to have experiences like that where everyone just can smile and be happy and be in awe of watching someone perform and just give their all with such vulnerability, like that's where it's just like there's that connection with like, man, you are giving everything. You can see that, and you can hear it, you can see it, all of your senses as an audience see that. It's amazing. It's not an experience, I admit, that I've had before. I haven't really dove into this type of music, but you have you've brought me in just by the work you do, and it's made me so interested on like, wow, I can't believe something like that can make someone feel that way. So
Well, I'm thrilled to
that's
hear that. And,
yeah.
going back to your previous question,
Yeah.
that's like I think we've all seen the meme of like the iceberg. That's like, this is the production, and then it has like the giant piece underneath, and
Mm-hmm.
like, this is all the stuff that goes into it.
Yep.
And I chuckle every time I see that circulating around. But honestly, it's true. And everything I do, I kind of approach in two different ways. There's the, of course, that more intangible creative side that like I'm always after, but there's also the very practical, like I treat it like a product in a way. And I know that can sound in the arts, it can sound like, oh, it's like insensitive, like this is like a product. But, really it is, because do people want it or not? And does this have a place in people's lives, right? Like you have to really think about the work that you're doing and how it connects with your audience and with the public. But anyway, I often start in a place of initial ideas. And honestly, a lot of times they're not musical ideas in the very beginning. It's just a concept, like a product concept, if you will. And I'm trying to sculpt it to make it the best possible thing that could connect with people. Um, and as soon as I feel like I have something that is let's say, has the bow on top, so to speak, like
Hmm.
it's a fully enveloped idea. Um, Everything has to serve that purpose. So anything that comes up that like seems like a good idea, but it's not driven by the mission of the project and the essence of the project, like it's got to go, it's got to get cut. Everything has to lead to that goal and that end game. And that's really is the driving force for me. And that's kind of the, let's say like the product idea, where you have to kind of be brutal too in those decisions, where sometimes you'll have a great idea that you really want to add into it. It's easy to just like have ideas and throw them in and then create like a mosh posh of things that maybe don't all fit perfectly together, and then it starts to feel inauthentic, and it doesn't serve the audience, um, and it weakens really the product in the end. So you have to be really brutal in saying, okay, like this, I really love this thing, but no, not right now. Like we're gonna just write it down for later. Maybe it will become relevant at some point. And you have to do that along the way until you can really finish the product in the end. And of course you
Interesting.
reconcile it with like the creative ideas. You want that very practical side and the creative side to come together.
Right. Right. So with and you've done there are so many projects that you've done, and they're so different from each other. But I have to ask, because I've gravitated towards one of the few I've gravitated towards is the harmony of the spheres. So what was that like? What was that true north for you? What was that idea that you wanted to make sure that no matter what you were serving for that project?
at 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 its heart, all my work is really driven by the motivation to make the world a better place in some way, really.
Hmm.
So uplifting people and imagining a brighter tomorrow. um, I have to preface that with, I love Star Trek. I was a huge Star Trek fan forever and ever and ever.
Okay.
And I'm thinking of like certain generations, like some of the older generations of Star Trek, where the future is like this utopia. It's like this uplifting thing. Like humanity comes out of its adolescence and people have come together. And that's what I want, like that's what I want for the future. So my work is really driven by this idea of how do I contribute in a positive way to make the world a better place. And that project in particular, I was feeling like there just is this heaviness societally right now, locally and around the globe. Um, and I thought, well, how do I create an experience that starts in that space, starts like in an earthly plane? This is what we're going through right now. And how do you, by the end of it, like take people out of it to like a hopeful place, and some place that just like feels like light and they've transcended. And so I really started with that. If you can imagine like a graph of an upward curve, I imagined that line and that trajectory. And then honestly, the concert program really came together quickly after conceptualizing it that way.
Is that how it typically works? Like a lot from the process, the concept taking the lion's share of the time, and then typically once you have that uh, kind of fleshed out, then the project tends to come together pretty quickly. Is that kind of how it works?
Typically, yes. You know, it's like the first 10% and the last 10% of anything that you do. Oh man, you know, you like pull your hair out in those
Mm-hmm.
stages.
Oh
The
yeah.
first 10% is like that concept building where sometimes it comes together a little faster, I suppose, but I feel like that's like a really deep soul searching phase. You got to really dig and make sure that foundation is just like it's set, it's ready to go, it's foolproof. And then at the very end, that like polishing phase, when you have to be like really scrutinizing, um, and think about all the different aspects of your project, from not just the performance experience itself, but also, you know, the branding of it, the media and the different kinds of assets that are associated with it, and you know the colors that you're going to put with it, and you know, every little thing. Who are you going to connect to about it in the media and in the press? Like, who are the right platforms and who's the right presenting organization for it? And you know, it's just like a million kind of things.
Well, you nailed it. I will tell you that much. You, if that is, if you kind of your overarch was to take someone from the present and kind of upswing them to this this universe of just like being in awe and being happy and just kind of taking the audience away from just the craziness of everyday life and just to enjoy something. You absolutely nailed it. So now there's another project that I would love to talk to you about. So
Let's do it.
it's called the 9 Ways to Destroy a Violin.
Yeah.
So tell me about that one. I love it. I love it. I'm curious
I just
to
love
hear
hearing it said out loud too, because it's a great
9 Ways
title.
to Destroy a Violin. Yeah.
That's part of a duo project I have actually with Tegan Farron, who is a fabulous violinist, string player. She also works with electronics and she's a composer. Um, she's one of those people out there that does it all. Anywho, we have a duo called Persephone and the Phoenix, and we've done a range of projects as well, of like concert experiences. But this in particular was kind of a hybrid installation and performance project. And it's kind of funny how it started. Actually, um, we were together in an artist residency at the Banff Center in Canada, and it was it was also, you know, similar kind of timing. We were writing a piece. You know, I was talking about all these like uplifting things, and these titles are so heavy for the work I do with Tegan, but it's called Fire in Which We Burn.
Okay.
And that has like an environmental slant, you know, but also a kind of political slant of thinking like, oh, there are all these fires out there in the world. Um, but I think all with the same kind of purpose of like, um, that piece in particular, actually, we felt that it was like the world is burning, but you just got to have like a dance party. That was like what we kept saying, like, we're throwing a dance party amidst the flames. So we like brought the joy into it in that way. And
Mhm.
honestly, 9 Ways to Destroy a Violin um, came from like this joyful side too, where we just wanted to take something and reimagine it and kind of turn it on its head. So let me give like a little background there. We came up with this idea while we were in Canada, and then we were able to gradually develop it. Um, we got a hold of all of these salvaged instruments from luthiers. And, you know, it's not something that you think about, but there are tons of musical instruments that get thrown away all the time. And it's, you know, it's tied into consumerism and cheaply manufactured instruments. You know, there are lots of young people learning instruments in the world, which is a wonderful thing, and I'm, you know, 100% in support of that, of course. Um, but you know, when you're first starting out, it's difficult. Are you going to buy a Are you going to buy a violin that's worth like $100,000, or are you going to like buy a cheap instrument in the beginning? Right, you're probably going to get a cheap instrument. That's the um, economically more sound decision to make, and it's readily accessible. Right. These instruments are not built to last. They're usually pretty cheaply made. And what ends up happening to them is they end up in a luthier shop, so it's someone who works on repairing string instruments. And the luthier looks at it and they tell the person that brings it in, listen, it's going to cost you more to fix this than it is for you to go out and buy a new one. And so they end up with like piles of string instruments in their shops. Some of them are, let's say, like you can salvage parts from it. But maybe one got sat on and it's like got a big crack in it. I don't know. So like something really drastic had happened to it, and it's just going to sit there and collect dust, or it's going to end up in the landfill. So we were starting this project, and we knew we needed to get these salvaged instruments because a big theme in the project was the waste cycle, and thinking of how do we reimagine waste in the music industry, and kind of finding this like weird way of imagining it. I originally thought that we were going to have to like just be on the phone all day calling shops. I was a little nervous because we needed a lot of what I lovingly call trash violins. We
Hmm.
needed a lot of them. We called like two shops, I think maybe three. And immediately the people were like, oh my gosh, I have all these instruments sitting in. Do you want these? Like, are you sure you want them? One shop I remember talking to, they were like, now, you can't play these, right? You're like, And I said, yeah, this is for a project. It's okay. Like they're going to serve a new purpose. Like it's going to be fine. And they were kind of nervous for me. They're like, are you sure that that these should be thrown away? It's like, no, no, no. I got you. I got you.
It's like all sales are final, no
Yeah,
refunds.
exactly. No refunds.
Yeah.
But they were happy to have the space opened up in their shops. And so it kind of makes you wonder how many of these just like trash instruments are just sitting there. Anyway, so we got a hold of these instruments, and then we started thinking of 9 ways. Of course, you can think of like a million ways that you can deconstruct something and then put it back together. But 9 ways of dismantling the instruments to then ultimately become something else. So one of the 9 ways was reanimation. And we did things to the piece of the violins, like connecting different electronic sensors to them. So when audience members were going through the exhibit and they could touch these broken pieces and they would make sound. And so all of a sudden, the once broken thing has become an instrument again, and they can like be musicians and make sounds, and really playfully with their hands go through. We had another one where we had a kind of like a carcass of an old violin. It didn't even have its pegs or strings, and I remember one of them in particular had a big gash going down the back. But we strapped it to a sawhorse, and we actually had audience members go up to it with a saw and saw through this violin in space. And there were contact mics on it, so that if you were like, I'm gonna take this saw to this violin sitting here in the middle of this big room, uh, everyone's gonna hear it. Like there were speakers and it was amplified. And for every showing of 9 Ways to Destroy Violin that we did, people were very kind of timid at first, and they would kind of like they'd poke it or kind of see what happens to it. And by the end of the evening, it was actually kind of a beautiful thing where like people had these like pent up emotions, and were kind of laughing and enjoying it and writing their names into the violin, and like leaving little notes for people who were coming later. And so it became this kind of like community object in the middle of the space.
That's incredible. And so I remember a vertical video going out, a reel that got a lot of attention. Got a lot of attention because it's such an interesting and really a brilliant way to think about this project, right? I mean, it's just like the first thing I remember when you reached out and you're like, "Hey, we're getting like this is getting some traction. This like one video is getting some traction." I'm like, "Let it ride," you know? And I was
That was totally a learning experience.
yeah, well, and because I think, and this is an important thing to share, is not everyone may agree with the kind of theory or philosophy that you have behind this specific project, and within a lot of the support that you were getting some criticism as well, and that I remember when we spoke. The question was like, well, what should we do? Should we take it down? Should we keep it up? And like I think anyone would ask. And I remember very vividly, like, keep it up, let it go, because there's just the reach that you were receiving was so incredible. And for maybe every one person that may have had something negative to say or would question or criticize, you had like 50 people that were like, this is brilliant, this, and supporting you. Tell me a little bit about your what you were thinking once you started seeing that this video that kind of featured some of these different areas within that project started going viral.
Oh my gosh, I was so happy to get your advice at that time because I was like, what is happening? How do I digest like this and what do we do? And um, you know, it's so interesting because the project itself, we had a pretty good amount of institutional support. The Prindle Institute was one of like the funders of the project, and the Cell Theater in New York City, and the going into it, we felt like the idea was pretty vetted, you know, and we were being very careful for how we sourced our materials and making sure that our job in this project was diverting things from the landfill, and just being able to reimagine within the musical ecosystem, what do we do with this this stream of waste. But on social media, you know you can't get all that information across in a video. And so we had some different cultural critics that came through, and they really loved the project. And of course, one made this video about it that was really a glowing review of the project. But on social media, people get like they see 5 seconds, and sometimes that's all you have, right? Like they just have a few seconds, and they make a judgment about it. And so the video just snowballed, and it went viral. And as like from the creator side, you kind of see that, okay, like I have released this thing into the world, and I really don't have control over that. And at first it was kind of scary, but then after a while, after it had been out for, I think a few days, and it had gotten past the 100K view mark, and it was snowballing from there.
Yeah.
I saw, like, even within the interactions, that it was actually like, um, it was getting people to like see this weird this weird angle of waste, of environmentalism, let's say, but like
Mhm.
in this specific loop in the music world. Um, and a lot of people really connected with it, and it was starting discussions about this like weird niche little thing, which after I sat back for a moment and thought about it and thought about what was happening, I was like, oh, actually, this is like the whole point of what we did. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes.
Um, and so then it was like a real weight that was lifted in that way. And what happened after, and there are some things that are, we're still in the works that I can't really talk about yet, but some different institutional partners saw the impact we were having, and they were like, oh, this is really cool. We want to do a new presentation of this in like this way or in that way. So it ended up actually being a really positive thing in the end. But as a creative entrepreneur is one way I like to really think about myself. But as a creative entrepreneur, um, you have to know your audience, and a big part of my audience has never really been social media, although social media is important and I've always seen the value in it. But a big part of my audience is the like presenting partners. And so a lot of my public facing materials, like they're geared toward connecting with like those institutions and those
Hmm.
performing arts centers and a million different type of presenting partners. And so to see that like through that way it also connected back around into that was pretty cool.
Well, and I think that shows that you're, at least from like a marketer's perspective, it is very cyclical in that way, right? So when you told me, you're like, hey, I've got this post out there and it's kind of getting low key viral, and I look at it, I'm like, you're at over 100,000 views. I'm like, this isn't low key. I got obsessed and I started looking through. I started looking through the comments, and I think you hit the nail on the head with it started discussion and conversation, because no matter what anybody does on earth in the world, there will be those that challenge and those that criticize. But then you would have someone come back and say, the message behind this isn't egregiously destroying perfectly good instruments. The message behind it is, these aren't perfectly good instruments. They're instruments that would be sitting on a shelf instead of, inflecting emotion on and serving a message. And I was seeing a lot of the critics coming around with like, I get it. That makes total sense. And in doing that, I think you've expanded your audience to those that um, kind of to the music newbies like me, that are just kind of, learning and engaging with your type of content. I mean, it was brilliant. It was a home run. In fact, it's a story that I tell, I tell other businesses that I work with. I'm like,
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah, I'm like, here's an example of what's done right, and why taking a risk can really reap a big reward. So, I think, I think the messaging behind all of the work that you do it's absolutely incredible. So one thing I asked as we start to wind down a little bit is, from a marketing and branding perspective, what's something that, you not necessarily regret, but wish you could have done differently throughout your musical entrepreneurial journey? What's
Mm.
something that perhaps that you've done that maybe you've learned from, that you, if you could have gone back and done it different, you would have done it different?
Oh man, I like know the answer right away.
Okay.
um, Community building in the arts, you ever see those like old portraits of artists and they look like really distressed and like, they look mad or sad or something.
Very
Black and
monotone.
white, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Um, that is, it, you could trace it back to like different points in time for different composers or artists, but that feeling from like many, many decades ago, I feel like is still in the arts, in that a lot of artists like want to be these like real purist in the art, in the sense that like they don't want to care about like the other things around them, and they don't want to like feed into the networking and like all these kind of things. Like, no, I'm an artist and I'm like doing my art. And there's something to be said about that, like really having that like pinpoint focus on what you're doing. um, But in my early days, I always saw networking as this like dirty word of like, oh, you're like using people and you're trying to like get something out of people. And that's kind of how my community around me had conceptualized of that. But as I got more experience and as I got older, I started realizing that it doesn't have to be networking as the way that we were kind of taught to think of it in that way. You can actually think about it as community building. And once I started doing that, like things really shifted for me in a lot of ways. Just that perspective shift of, I'm not going out there like trying to use people. I'm creating a link with them, and they can help me with something, I can help them with something, and you build that community around your work. And honestly, I feel like that's really how life works. And I like to think about it going all the way back to like the prehistoric days in like hunter gatherer societies. Like, when people say like it takes a village, like, well, it really took a village. Like you had a finite number of people and everyone relied on one another to get things done so that everyone could survive. And I think that idea is at the heart of humanity and human societal structures.
Hmm.
And building community around you, building people who believe in your work, but also that you believe in their work and that you can really make a positive impact together. That is invaluable. And those are the people that, you like bring each other up slowly and over time. And it just, once I made that perspective shift, so many things changed for me in really great ways.
That's interesting. That's a very, yeah. So yeah, networking is collaborating. I used to be the same way.
Oh, I love that. Networking is
Networking
collaborating.
is collaborating. It's the more pillars you have under a foundation, the stronger that foundation is. I firmly believe that. But I was in the same spot. Early in my career, I hated networking. It felt uncomfortable for me. I never looked at it in the vein of you know, what could I get out? Like it being perceived as like, what can I get from somebody else? It was more so just, there was this shyness to me,
Mm-hmm,
once
mm-hmm.
upon a time, Kevin used to be shy, not anymore, but networking, especially now within the digital age, and I can say in my industry, I mean, networking is paramount, and it's interesting to hear that's expanded into other industries as well. That's incredible. So so can you share any insights? Can you give me like an exclusive? This little podcast has never had you heard it here first sort of thing. Can you give me any sort of like anything where I could say like you heard it here first?
Huh. Um, okay. I got one.
Okay.
It's kind of a niche music thing though, but I run blah blah a contemporary. I run a chamber music festival in Virginia called Seven Hills Chamber Music. I run it alongside Dudley Rain, who is a violist and also an entrepreneur. And we have a summer festival every year that's 2 weeks in August. And as part of the summer festival, we have composers in residence. And this year, Joan Tower, who is this, you know, using the pun, but she is a towering figure in the contemporary music world. Um, I believe this year she turned 85, and it's this huge explosion of celebrating her work and her legacy as a pivotal composer in the field. Anyway, she's going to be one of our composers in residence, and we are beyond excited. We just got like the official word. So you heard it here first.
You heard it here first. Awesome. Yes. Okay. I'm pretty sure I can get like a medal or a patch or something that I can officially say you heard it here first. That's awesome.
Yeah, we are
So
beyond excited.
that's
Her
incredible.
music is amazing, and she's just like she's an amazing person. So we can't wait.
Congratulations. That's awesome. So for your brand and all of the different brands that you work with or collaborate with, where would someone go? Because I'll tell you, if I'd love for anyone listening or anyone that is watching this on YouTube, go find Nicole Brancato, NicoleBrancato.com. We'll make sure that we put her website in the show notes, but just go and look through all of the amazing work that she does. If you want something where you can, sit, close your eyes and just go for a ride, it's Nicole's work is perfect for that. But where else do you want people to search you out? Because you're everywhere, right? I
I'm
mean, you're in a lot of different
everywhere.
spots.
I have, of course, my website, and through there you can sign up for my newsletter, which it goes out occasionally. I don't spam anyone, and
Okay.
it's fun stuff. So if you do sign up, I think you'll like it. And I'm on Instagram. You can give me a follow. My handle is n dot Brancato, Brancato, on Instagram. And I'm also on YouTube, also as Nicole Brancato, for seeing some of my different concert videos and projects and things like that. Yeah, I have a few albums out that are, on across streaming platforms, whether you use Spotify or Tidal or who knows, whatever, YouTube Music. And I think that's it.
So you're
Gosh,
everywhere. So
I'm
YouTube,
everywhere.
Instagram, Instagram. I mean, everywhere, anywhere, and everywhere, which is awesome. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's such an awesome story to share. It's I didn't have this context of what your story was before speaking to you here today, and it's just incredible what you do. Thank you for what you do. I think the work that you do brings so much inspiration and emotion and just happiness to people. And I'm a huge advocate for that because it's a crazy world out there. So
It really
the
is.
world that you create in the work that you do is absolutely brilliant. So on behalf of everyone who has seen your work, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was such a pleasure. And keep doing the amazing things you're doing. Because
Thank
really,
you.
like, your podcast is awesome. And of course, like, all your work out there with marketing, with entrepreneurship is really awesome.
Oh, thank you. Networking forever, right?
Networking.
Well, very cool. Well, that will do it for today's episode. Take a look in the show notes for everywhere that you can find Nicole. We'll make sure we put that in there. And yeah, until next time, tune in again. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Five Dubs Marketing Pros is hosted by me, Kevin Berrier. Our executive producer is MDDC Executive Director Rebecca Snyder. Post-production by Caroline Pecora. Our theme music is by Azulu Studio. A special thank you to our guests for being with us. You can find Five Dubs and Five Dubs Marketing Pros on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast.